Well, I'll pass out my resume at the end if you're interested. We'll have some literature in the back for those of you who would like to learn a little bit more about our campaign and my candidacy. It's a pleasure to see so many people here. I think this is the first annual. Is that right, Roger? Hopefully it'll be the first annual. I hope it's been very productive for you. I looked at the agenda, and these are hot topics that people all over the country are talking about, and certainly here in Oregon. I also want to thank the Vigilant team for extending this invitation to the both of us, and I was very glad to accept it because I recognize the people in this room, as was indicated, you are decision makers, and your ability to make correct decisions for your businesses, for our region, is absolutely critical to economic restoration. And so I'm very grateful that you would spend the time not only to look into these issues together, but stay long enough to hear a few words from me. And since Roger invited me to give you some background, I would like to do that. I'm a native of this area. I was born in Multnomah County. I was raised in Washington and Yamhill counties. So you could say I'm a son of the 1st Congressional District. And 16 years ago, using money from our savings account and a spare bedroom from our Tualatin home, my wife Allison is here in the middle table, we started this company that we call Game Face Incorporated. And over time, we've been able to employ 60 people. Certainly larger than we ever thought this little idea would generate. But as we employ these 60 people, we also employ, as we see it, their families. It means a lot to us. And in that time, in 16 years, we've been able to acquire about 400 clients all over North America and even in Europe. And all in all, our firm has serviced more than 30,000 executives in our particular industry. And I should indicate what our industry is. Game Face, as Roger said, focuses in the sports community. It's not exclusive to sports, but that's really our cup of tea. That's where most people know our business. And we work with a variety of sports franchises, minor league, major league, and intercollegiate athletic programs in best business practices, how they can run a more sustainable, more fan-friendly enterprise so that obviously they do well, like any business wants to do. And we have been, as I said, fortunate to have 400 clients. Those clients come from within the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the National Hockey League, Major League Soccer, and a bunch of other minor league sports that some of you know and don't know, as well as a lot of intercollegiate athletic programs. But I must tell you, perhaps what gives me the most satisfaction is that our company, over the years, has played a very direct role in helping to launch the careers of more than 500 young people who want to work in this very hard to break into industry. And that always is what gives me the biggest smile, to be able to say that we helped launch careers for individuals. Yet I will tell you, despite these accomplishments, which are not solely because of my efforts, but because of a great team that we put together and fantastic, trusting clients, as the father of 3 sons here in Oregon, I wonder how my kids and grandkids, and frankly how your kids and grandkids, will find and build a career here in the future. And will they have to leave our state to find those opportunities? Will we only see them when they come back to visit during the holiday season, such as we're in today? Or, I wonder, can we make real changes in the way we do things so that Oregon becomes a better place to work, to contribute to your community, and someday retire? People have asked, rightly so, how my professional experience starting and running a small business in Oregon prepares me to be a member of Congress. That's a fair question, with a simple answer. The most important task of Congress today, as I see it, is to make sure our economy is creating jobs, something I've been fortunate enough to do, as I've said. I'm proud to announce also today that I've just received the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Business, the leading voice for small business owners across the country. This is on top of the 20 district-wide mayors who are Democrat, Republican, and Independent, who have already stepped forward to endorse me because they believe I'm the best candidate to partner with them in creating jobs for Northwest Oregon. You see, I know how hard it is to create a job, and I know how easy it is to constrain jobs through short-sighted policy. I've been fortunate to have been able to sign the front of paychecks for 16 years. Yet, like many of you, I understand that what it's like, I should say, to get to the bottom of that stack at the end of the month, pause as you look at that last check on the stack, and slip it into your desk drawer quietly because you know it wouldn't be fiscally responsible for you to pay yourself just yet. To start my business, I had to travel the country, armed with nothing but my ideas and a will to succeed. Through patience and perseverance, I was able to break into some of the most storied and successful front offices in my industry, convincing them that they needed what I had to offer. After building their trust, I executed on that promise, and I've kept their business. When name brands as recognizable as the New York Mets, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Green Bay Packers, and the Boston Celtics need certain expertise in certain areas of their business, they've called all the way to Tualatin, Oregon to get it. As a small business owner, I knew I had to wake up every day and deliver positive, visible results for my company, my employees, and of course my family. I'm accustomed to solving problems, not pointing fingers. So I would in turn ask those who say I don't have the experience for Congress to follow. We've been electing lawyers turned politicians for years. How do you like the results that's producing for us? I'm wired to create jobs. I'm wired to launch careers, to build consensus, and work within a budget. I've met a payroll with my wife for 194 straight months. I think we need more of that skill set in Washington, D.C., not less. So if I'm fortunate enough to be chosen by the voters of the 1st District, what would I do in Congress? Well, it seems typical of candidates, especially those who've never actually created a job in the private sector, to lay out a 100-point plan on how they're going to create jobs. I like to focus on 3 pillars essential to growing our economy. The first is, we need a simple, predictable, and fair tax code. I'd like to ask perhaps a rhetorical question. Can anyone here answer the following questions with any degree of confidence? Number 1, what will the tax rates be on individuals and small businesses? What will they be at the end of next year? Number 2, what will the tax rate be on investments and new businesses? Or number 3, what will the tax brackets look like a year from now? Now, none of us knows the answers, and including members of Congress, nobody knows the answers. And that's the problem. We have politicians saying that businesses should invest and create jobs, but they keep tinkering with the rule book and threaten to change it every 12 months or so. And then they act surprised that companies who they simultaneously like to demonize are holding an estimated $2 trillion in cash reserves rather than investing it. Employers, whether they're putting their own money at risk or that of investors, need stability and assurance so they can plan, so that they can budget, so they can measure risk. Though their future is uncertain, they're sure of one thing: Congress is paralyzed with partisanship. So what can we, or more specifically, what can I do about it? Well, I'm increasingly hearing of a quiet, emerging bipartisan consensus that we need wholesale changes to the tax code. Our politics, however, is stuck in a tired argument about 10-year-old tax policy and band-aid approaches to tax relief. It's gotten us nowhere, ladies and gentlemen. We need people who will stop talking and start enacting an overhaul that is bold and bipartisan, which would raise revenues and decrease our dependence on government spending, since more people would be working. So what would a tax overhaul look like? Well, it's important first to understand what the current system, how the current system is failing us. For starters, it's 10,000 pages of maze-like loopholes written by lawyers and understood only by those who can afford them. Meanwhile, lobbyists swoop in and assist mega corporations in not only navigating through the clutter, but also in greasing government to help their clients avoid taxes. Indeed, the well-connected become the well-compensated. The most famous of these cases is General Electric, which in 2010 made over $14 billion in profits worldwide, yet paid no federal income tax. And 30 megacorporations made a profit between 2008 and 2010, yet claimed a net tax benefit. So who gets stuck paying the bill? Oregon's middle class and our small and medium-sized businesses. How is that fair? Everyone knows our country needs more revenue. We can begin by reforming and eliminating unfair and politically motivated corporate loopholes. Now, don't get me wrong. Some deductions are important to sustain any growth or constancy our economy currently has. For example, we need to maintain the mortgage interest deduction, which was designed to help middle-income families afford a home. But do we really need to allow the deduction for second homes? Is it important for our government to subsidize vacation homes for those who don't need it? Of course not. President Obama's National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility, known as the Simpson-Bowles Commission, spent 8 months last year coming up with bipartisan recommendations for eliminating loopholes and lowering tax rates across the board. While some of these recommendations need greater and updated scrutiny, the result is a simpler tax code that doesn't pick winners and losers and that broadens the tax base to bring in those who are avoiding taxes. A tax overhaul, I believe, is very doable. And the American people, who spent 6 billion hours last year trying to prepare their taxes, are ready for this change. Now, the second pillar to strengthen our economy. While we're creating a simpler, predictable, more fair tax code for our families and businesses to plan around, we need our next congressional representative to be an aggressive advocate for Oregon workers in the world marketplace. That starts by electing someone in Oregon's 1st District who has a business sense for promoting what we do well, while also recruiting others to invest here. My background is ideally suited to fill this need. Obviously, I'm talking about trade. But successful trade also requires that we never take our eye off the ball in seeing that, one, we knock down tariffs and other barriers for Oregon products and services, and two, we defend Oregon interests by holding our trading partners accountable to the agreements they've signed. Since our early days, Oregon has been built on trade, and the 1st District has been dependent on it, as Roger alluded to. The most populous district in Oregon today is also the most multifaceted. We sit on the Pacific Rim, where 40% of the world's population resides, boasting diverse and valuable goods and services produced in the high-tech sector of Washington County, the fisheries on the North Coast, the forests in Columbia and Clatsop counties, the nurseries and vineyards of Yamhill County, and the center of business activity right here in downtown Portland. Bordered by the navigable waters of the Columbia and the Willamette, our largest city in the district, for heaven's sakes, is called Portland. Portland Business Alliance released a report showing that 470,000 jobs in Oregon are dependent on international trade. And specific to the Portland region, the Brookings Institution estimates as many as 268,000 jobs rely on international business. Truly, our assets are the envy of districts throughout the country and are the basis of our current and future jobs, but only if we take advantage of our strengths. It's time for leadership that will capitalize on a growing world economy that wants our products. I will work to provide greater access to what we produce. Specifically, our largest employer in the 1st District is Intel. 80% of their revenue is earned overseas, drawing a direct line between its trade success and the $3 billion D1X investment in Washington County right now. As we consider our current Asian partners, we look to South Korea, which is purchasing nearly $1 billion in Oregon goods this year alone. And that was before the recent free trade agreements were signed, which I alone supported among the 2 leading candidates for this congressional seat. And in China, our biggest trade partner, Oregon is exporting over $3 billion in goods in 2011. This figure doesn't even capture the value of Oregon's leading services exports, like software, architecture, and engineering. I give this context to underline how important China is as a market for Oregon workers. But it's a trade relationship that requires each side play by the rules to which it's agreed. For instance, I support SolarWorld's effort to crack down on illegal Chinese subsidies of solar panels because I believe in a vigorous defense of our companies and our workers. Just as aggressively as I will fight to move Oregon products around the world, I will vigorously fight to make sure we are competing on an even playing field. Ladies and gentlemen, trade is an essential part of rebuilding a prosperous Oregon and nation. And we need to continue to enact and monitor agreements that open new markets for the First District. If we're allowed to compete, I believe we can win. Now, while we build a simple, predictable, and fair tax system so our entrepreneurs and businesses can invest, and as we aggressively help them find new customers around the world, Congress has to get serious about getting our country's fiscal house in order. A balanced budget is the right thing to do for job creation today and for tomorrow. This, therefore, is the third pillar of a sound economy. In 1997, President Clinton and a Republican Congress collaborated on a set of tax reforms designed to grow the economy, coupled with spending controls designed to slow the growth of government. What happened? Well, as you probably know, between 1996 and 2001, 10 million additional taxpayers joined the rolls as a result of new jobs. We enjoyed 4 straight years of government surpluses between 1998 and 2001, and the unemployment rate plummeted to 4%. Reform isn't rocket science. It just requires political leadership and a desire to solve problems, not jockey for the next election. It requires putting people before partisanship. And maybe, just maybe, it means we need to get rid of longtime insiders who are more focused on climbing the next rung of their political career than serving the public interest. One thing running a small business has taught me is that sustained revenues seem to fix most problems. That's why I believe the best way to balance the budget is to grow the economy. And the first 2 plans I laid out must be the cornerstone of any jobs idea or plan. But we can't simply hope that the industriousness of Oregonians and Americans will save us from spendthrift politicians. New congressional courage is needed to protect future generations from having to pay for this continuous credit card Congress. 2001 has produced a $1.3 trillion deficit, the second highest in history. Our national debt now sits at about $15 trillion, a number unfathomable 10 years ago. And last year, $414 billion in taxpayer money was spent to pay down the interest on that debt, yet we have nothing productive to show for it. We need to control the growth of government borrowing. And we need to do it in a way that represents our shared values, specifically protecting Medicare and Social Security, and ensuring that those who are struggling have the help they need to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head, and have hope for a job that can someday secure a better future for them and their family. I think we can prioritize spending to protect our most vulnerable while investing in those things that will increase our competitiveness, like education and infrastructure. I've come to the realization, however, that the people deserve the right to rein in Congress's insatiable desire to spend. That's why I support a balanced budget amendment. It will force politicians to do what they've not shown a willingness to do over time: stop borrowing money we don't have. I would have hoped that we could count on members of Congress to do their job, but that's become wishful thinking, hasn't it? And believe it or not, today, December 5th, marks the 950th day since the U.S. Senate passed a budget. Members of Congress, apparently unconcerned with the uncertainty throughout the country, would rather just avoid making any difficult decisions and just spend as they go. This unwillingness to perform the basic function of government is having real-world implications around the country as businesses concerned about the future hoard cash and families watch the retirement funds dissolve. However, as we consider how and when a balanced budget amendment could be passed, we must recognize that it would be impossible to implement immediately for two reasons. First, our budget is simply too out of whack. A constitutional mandate to balance our books in this recessionary period would require severe tax hikes and dramatic cuts in services and our national defense. But with a balanced budget amendment phased in over time, we'd be able to bring certainty to markets while growing the economy and reining in spending. And in turn, we'd return confidence in America and in our government, and most importantly, in our leadership. The second reason passing a balanced budget amendment would take time is that we would need to wait on the states to go through the long and arduous process of ratifying the amendment. I believe strongly that the people should have the right to determine whether this is a policy they want, but they'll never get that chance until Congress gives it to them. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, creating a simple, predictable, fair tax code, helping Oregon workers export their goods and services to a waiting world, balancing the federal budget, these are the pillars of economic growth and job creation and would serve as my focus if elected. Now, I admit, I am not your typical candidate. I'm not a political insider. I have not worked my way up through the system, nor have others been hoisting me up the political career ladder. So, if you think the problem in Congress is that we don't have enough politicians or lawyers, then I guess you should support my opponent. But if you think it's time to elect someone in the 1st District who knows what it takes to create jobs, who knows what it takes to solve problems in a bipartisan way, and will work with anyone who's ready to reason, regardless of their party, then I'm your candidate. And today I ask for your support and the commitment of your vote. Thank you very much. Roger has allowed me to spend what time we have left in answering any questions you may have, hearing your comments and suggestions, so that I can be a better representative for you if things go well at the end of January. I'd be happy to take anyone's comments or questions at this time. Yes, sir.
Do you have a quick outline of your tax simplification plan? Just a 2-minute summary?
Yes, what you can do, first of all, we will be giving you, as you leave today, some details on a brochure that you'll be receiving. So I, first of all, encourage you to take that, take as many as you'd like so you can share it with other people. Once again, as I said, the first priority is to eliminate loopholes on the corporate side that, frankly, are making it a very unfair tax policy and unpredictable and costing the federal government and the Treasury billions and billions of dollars. At the same time, we must lower the tax rates. We must lower the tax rates for all parties concerned. This is where the tax relief comes for the middle class. Specifically, what I would encourage you to look at beyond what you'll find on the brochure that you'll have leaving, as well as on my website, which is cornillesforcongress.com. One of the things that I find very encouraging as a starting point is what I mentioned earlier, the Bowles-Simpson report. And the Bowles-Simpson report has numerous recommendations, not only on tax reform, but on entitlement reform and other things, to bring our deficit under control. And I think that it's a sad commentary that when that was passed, or I should say when it was presented in December of last year, almost a year ago today, the president who commissioned this report and Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, essentially took that plan, thumbed through it, and stuck it in their respective desk drawers. And nothing has been done on it in that time. And now what are we doing? We're heading into another election season when people are afraid to take positions. So rather than get into more details, I would ask you to look at the materials you're going to receive. If you perhaps you've already perused the Bull-Simpson report on your own, but that to me is where we have to start, and if I get back there, that's what I want to put on the table. Thank you. Please, sir.
I have one question. Do you support a tax term limits for both senators and representatives?
The question was about term limits. Historically, I have not supported term limits. As a voter, I have not found that to be the best solution. And it's probably because of my professional background. By that I mean, sir, if I'm successful working with an organization, let's say a client, and over 4, 6, 8 years we're getting very positive results from our work together, it would seem counterintuitive for me to walk into their office on the first day of the 7th year or the 9th year and say, well, Portland Trail Blazers, we've had a good run together, but I got to tell you, I've been term limited and I can't help you anymore. And what I think it requires instead is activism from citizens to be paying more attention to what their legislators, what their elected officials are doing or not doing. Quite frankly, I think in the 1st District, and I've been unabashed about saying, I think we've been poorly represented here for many years. But I take as much responsibility for that as anyone else, because I and those who have been working and living in the 1st District haven't done enough. We haven't held people accountable for their lack of productivity, their lack of actually getting things done that are helpful to our district. So I say we got to put the emphasis back on the voter and the citizen. And I also, I think if we do that, we'll find more honest answers. And that's why I'm asking for your support, because I come from that background. I come from the private sector. I come from off the couch, like so many other people who in the last few years have decided to pay attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C. I think that's the best solution. In the back, sir.
What's your perception of the people down at Occupy Portland? Is it warranted, and is it losing focus?
Well, as far as their initial effort to bring attention to what ails them, absolutely it's warranted. I understand their frustration, their despair, quite frankly. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I have 2 sons, 3 sons, 2 of whom are in college right now. I can tell you, if you're like me as a parent with college-age kids, you're not real excited about their graduation date. Because you don't know what that means. Does that mean you've got another tenant in your basement? And so when I see what's going on in this country and the lack of job creation and the lack of real leadership to give us some certainty, and then I see what's happening a few blocks away with people who are saying, look, we don't like the fact that leaders aren't keeping to their promises. We don't like the fact that people who have done things to hurt our economy apparently are getting away with it. I understand that they would want to march on Wall Street or in the Portland blocks. Now, obviously, I think you asked me from that point on how it evolved. You know, certainly I can't condone people who break city ordinances. We all have the right to enjoy our parks and our cities and our streets. But I think that the genesis of their protest is something all of us can relate to in one form or another. Thank you, sir.
With all due respect, I mean, I think most people in this room would make a similar list of the things that you see as being important. The question is, what power are you going to bring to Congress to move that entrenched culture from where it is to where it needs to be?
Fair question. First of all, I mean, many people ask me, you're one of 435 in the House, you're one of 535 in Congress. How can you affect a change? Well, first of all, the quick answer I would give you is if people like you and I, if we don't step up, what's the alternative? The alternative is more of the same. The alternative is entrenched partisanship. The alternative is career politicians just working their way up at your expense. So we have to start one representative, one district at a time. But let me also share something with you that perhaps is counterintuitive, especially in today's political turmoil. And that is, a lot of people said, you're going to go back, and a lot of people have suggested, I say, you're going to go back and John Boehner's going to tell you exactly how to vote. You're going to be his boy, aren't you? I find that humorous. I'm not running for John Boehner. I'm running for the people who I think have been largely underrepresented for years. I'm not leaving a fun, interesting, successful business to go be someone's boy. Nor am I going back there to sit on the back bench and just watch things happen. I'm going back there to be heard. They know me back in Washington, D.C. They know my name. They know my strengths. They know my skill set, my background. And they also know why I'm running. But let me suggest this, too, from a pragmatic standpoint. If you're John Boehner, and we, meaning the Republican Party, win back this seat in 2011, in January, the first time, admittedly, it's been done since the Watergate era, are you going to force this young freshman Republican to vote party lines in the 1st District of Oregon? If you do, what can you be assured? He won't be back in November of 2011. Thus, he can't create any positive change for this state, not to mention Congress as a whole. John Boehner's not dumb. He knows that I can't vote with the party 98% of the time, like, frankly, my opponent has done in Salem for the last 5 years. Because A, that's not me, B, that's not the district, and C, I'll be a very, very short-termer. 8 months. What can you do in 8 months? It's very difficult. And John Boehner gets this. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going back to represent a party. I'm going back to represent a people who need a strong voice for the issues that I've outlined. Any further questions? How can you help me? Well, thank you for asking. I know 98% of you were thinking that. And if you don't mind, Roger, I know this is a nonpartisan affair, but I will tell you, we do need your help. If you're really serious about changing the way we think here in this district, if you're really serious about someone who understands what it takes to create a job and putting that representative in the Portland region, representing you in Congress, this is our opportunity. Now, yes, it's going to be difficult, but it's not impossible by any means. Crazier things have happened, even in the last year, in special elections. This is the first special election of 2011. In fact, it's the first election of 2011, ladies and gentlemen, nationwide. Let's let Oregon send a statement to the rest of the country. We're not interested in party affiliation. We're interested in results. And this is the candidate we believe will help us, like these mayors and other elected officials and business leaders and community leaders all over the district have said. We think this is the right person to help us get to where we need to be. If you believe that way as well, and if you don't believe it today, I hope you'll research my candidacy further, talk to us, and someday when you get there, I hope you'll do everything you can to help us turn this election the way it needs to go for our region, our district, and ultimately our state and country. Thank you very much for your time and attention.